Marcus Thompson was a man who thought he was better than everyone else in his neighborhood. He lived in a nice area called Millbrook where all the houses looked perfect and the grass was always green. Marcus was 32 years old and worked at an insurance company where he decided how much money people got when bad things happened to them. He made good money and always wore expensive clothes and drove a fancy car that cost more than most people made in a year. But Marcus had a dark secret that nobody in his neighborhood knew about. He liked to hurt animals, especially dogs, and he thought it was funny when they got scared and ran away. This was not something normal people did, but Marcus was not a normal person. He had something wrong inside his head that made him enjoy seeing pain in creatures that could not fight back. Every day after work, Marcus would put on his running shoes and go for what he called his evening walk. But this was not a regular walk to get exercise or enjoy the fresh air. Marcus would fill his pockets with small rocks and pieces of broken glass before he left his house. He would walk through the parks and quiet streets looking for stray dogs or cats that had no homes and no one to protect them. When Marcus found these helpless animals, he would pretend to be nice at first. He would call to them in a sweet voice and sometimes even pretend to have food in his hands. The poor animals, who were usually hungry and lonely, would come closer because they trusted humans to be kind. But Marcus was not kind at all. As soon as the animals got close enough, he would kick them as hard as he could or throw rocks at their heads. Marcus loved watching the animals cry out in pain and run away with their tails between their legs. He would laugh out loud and feel powerful because he had hurt something that could not hurt him back. Sometimes he would chase the animals for several blocks just to kick them again when they got tired and could not run anymore. The people in Millbrook had no idea what Marcus was doing because he was very careful to only hurt animals when no one else was around. During the day when his neighbors saw him, Marcus would smile and wave and act like a normal, friendly person. He would even stop to pet dogs that belonged to people and tell the owners how much he loved animals. This made everyone think Marcus was a nice man who would never hurt anything. But at night, when the streets were empty and most people were inside watching television or eating dinner, Marcus would become a different person. He would spend hours walking around looking for victims. He kept a mental map of all the places where stray animals liked to hide, and he would check these spots every few days to see if there were new animals to torture. Marcus had been doing this terrible thing for almost 3 years, and he had hurt dozens of innocent animals. Some of the animals he kicked so hard that they probably had broken bones. Others he hit with rocks so many times that they bled and limped away to find somewhere safe to heal. Marcus never thought about how much pain he was causing or how scared these animals must have been. He also never worried that someone might catch him or that there would be consequences for his actions. Marcus thought he was too smart and too careful to ever get in trouble. He believed that since the animals were strays with no owners, nobody would care what happened to them. Marcus was wrong about this, and very soon he would learn that every bad action comes back to hurt the person who does it. The neighborhood of Millbrook looked peaceful and safe, but it was hiding a monster who walked among the good people every day. Marcus Thompson was about to discover that even the most careful predators eventually make a mistake that changes everything forever. On a cold Tuesday evening in November, Marcus was walking through the downtown area of Millbrook looking for his next victims. The streets were wet from rain that had been falling all day, and most people were staying inside their warm houses. This was perfect weather for Marcus because fewer people would be outside to see what he was planning to do. As Marcus walked past the popular coffee shop called Beans and Dreams, he noticed something that made his heart beat faster with excitement. 3 beautiful golden dogs were playing together in the small park area next to the shop. These were not ordinary stray dogs that looked dirty and sick. These dogs had shiny, clean fur and looked very healthy and well fed. The 3 dogs were having fun chasing each other around the park benches and rolling in the wet grass. The biggest dog was golden brown with a white chest and looked like he weighed about 70 pounds. The second dog was smaller and lighter colored with long, fluffy fur that bounced when she ran. The third dog was the smallest of the group and had the most beautiful golden coat that seemed to shine even in the dim evening light. Marcus watched the dogs play and noticed they were wearing expensive-looking collars, but he could not see any owner nearby. He looked around the area carefully and saw that most of the people were inside the coffee shop drinking hot drinks and talking. A few people were walking quickly down the sidewalk trying to get out of the cold rain, but nobody seemed to be watching the three dogs. This was exactly the kind of opportunity Marcus loved. 3 healthy dogs with no protection and no witnesses around to stop him from doing whatever he wanted. Marcus felt the familiar feeling of excitement building up inside him as he reached into his jacket pocket and felt the sharp rocks he always carried with him. Marcus decided to use his usual trick to get the dogs to trust him before he hurt them. He walked slowly toward the dogs and started talking to them in a sweet, gentle voice, like he really cared about them. He said things like, "Come here, beautiful dogs, and do you want to be my friends?" He made clicking sounds with his tongue and patted his leg like he had treats to give them. The 3 dogs stopped playing and looked at Marcus with curious faces. Their tails started wagging because they thought this human wanted to be nice to them. Dogs are naturally trusting animals who believe that most people are good and want to help them. These 3 dogs had been treated well their whole lives, so they had no reason to fear humans. The biggest dog came over to Marcus first and sniffed his hand to see if he had any food. Marcus petted the dog gently on the head and spoke in a kind voice, while he looked around to make sure nobody was watching. The other 2 dogs saw that their friend was getting attention, and they came over too because they wanted to be petted as well. All 3 dogs were now standing close to Marcus with their tails wagging and their tongues hanging out of their mouths. They looked up at him with trusting eyes and waited for him to continue being nice to them. Marcus smiled, but it was not a kind smile. It was the smile of someone who was about to do something very cruel. Marcus waited until he was sure no one could see him clearly from the coffee shop windows. The rain was making it harder for people to see outside, and the street lights were not very bright. Marcus knew this was his perfect chance to hurt these innocent animals who had done nothing wrong except trust a human being who was actually a monster. The 3 beautiful dogs had no idea what was about to happen to them as they stood there waiting for more gentle pets from the man they thought was their new friend. What Marcus did not know was that these 3 beautiful dogs belonged to one of the most famous action movie stars in the world. Jason Statham had brought his beloved pets Max, Charlie, and Luna with him to Millbrook because he was filming a new action movie in the area. Jason was not just any regular dog owner. He loved his 3 golden retrievers more than anything else in his life and treated them like his own children. Jason had owned these dogs for over 5 years, and they had been with him through all the difficult times in his career. When Jason felt sad or stressed from making movies, the dogs would comfort him by lying next to him and letting him pet their soft fur. When Jason traveled around the world for his work, he always tried to bring his dogs with him because he could not stand being away from them for too long. Max was the oldest and biggest of the 3 dogs. Jason had rescued him from a dog shelter when Max was just a tiny puppy. Charlie was the middle dog who loved to play fetch and could catch a tennis ball from very far away. Luna was the youngest and smallest dog, but she was also the smartest and could do many tricks like rolling over and shaking hands. Each of these dogs had cost Jason thousands of dollars, not because he bought them from expensive stores, but because he spent so much money taking care of them. Jason made sure his dogs ate the best food and saw the best veterinarians and had the most comfortable beds and toys. He even hired a special person whose only job was to take care of the dogs when Jason was busy working on movie sets. On this particular evening, Jason was inside the coffee shop having an important meeting with the director of his new movie. They were talking about the action scenes they would film the next day and looking at pictures on a laptop computer. Jason had left his dogs outside with their handler, but the handler had to use the bathroom and asked Jason if it was okay to leave the dogs alone for just a few minutes. Jason said yes, because his dogs were very well trained and never ran away or got into trouble. Max, Charlie, and Luna knew they were supposed to stay in the park area and wait for their handler to come back. But the dogs were young and playful, and when they saw some interesting smells and sounds, they decided to explore a little bit. The three dogs were not really lost or abandoned like Marcus thought. They were just having fun playing together while they waited for their handler to return. If Marcus had looked more carefully, he would have seen that these dogs were wearing very expensive collars with special tags that had Jason Statham's name and phone number on them. But Marcus was too excited about hurting the dogs to pay attention to these important details. He was also too stupid to realize that dogs this beautiful and healthy probably belonged to someone who cared about them very much. Marcus thought all dogs were just animals that nobody cared about, and that he could hurt them without any consequences. Inside the coffee shop, Jason was starting to worry because his meeting was taking longer than expected, and he wanted to check on his dogs. He kept looking out the window, but the glass was foggy from the rain, and he could not see clearly into the park area. Jason trusted his dogs to behave well, but he also knew that unexpected things could happen when animals were left alone. Jason had no idea that, at this very moment, his three most precious companions were standing next to a man who was planning to hurt them badly. Jason also had no idea that in just a few minutes his whole evening was going to change, and he would have to use all of his fighting skills to protect the animals he loved more than his own life. Marcus looked around one more time to make sure nobody was watching him, and then his face changed from fake kindness to real cruelty. Without any warning, Marcus lifted his heavy boot and kicked the smallest dog, Luna, right in her side, as hard as he could. The poor dog let out a loud, painful cry and fell sideways onto the wet grass. Her golden fur was now dirty with mud, and she was breathing very fast because the kick had knocked the air out of her lungs. The other two dogs, Max and Charlie, immediately knew something was very wrong. They stopped wagging their tails, and their ears went back against their heads. Both dogs moved quickly to stand between Marcus and their hurt friend Luna. They started barking loudly to try to scare Marcus away and protect Luna from getting hurt again. But Marcus was not scared of the dogs at all. In fact, their barking made him even more excited because he knew he was causing them fear and pain. Marcus laughed in a mean way and reached into his pocket to grab one of the sharp rocks he always carried. He threw the rock as hard as he could, and it hit Charlie right on his head near his ear. Charlie yelped in pain, and blood started to drip from where the rock had cut him. Now all three dogs were scared and hurt, but they did not run away because they had been trained to stay together as a family. Max, who was the biggest and strongest dog, tried to bark even louder to get help from any humans who might be nearby. But Marcus just thought this was funny, and he kicked Max in the leg so hard that the big dog almost fell over. Some people who were walking by on the sidewalk heard the dogs crying and barking, and they stopped to see what was happening. An old woman with gray hair saw Marcus hurting the dogs, and she yelled at him to stop being so cruel. But Marcus turned around and told her to mind her own business and go away. When the old woman tried to get closer to help the dogs, Marcus pushed her so hard that she almost fell down. More people started to come out of the nearby shops and restaurants when they heard all the noise. Some of them took out their phones and started recording videos of Marcus being mean to the dogs. Marcus did not care that people were watching him because he thought nobody would do anything to stop him. He was wrong about this, but he was too stupid and mean to realize it. Marcus kept hurting the dogs even though more and more people were gathering around and yelling at him to stop. He seemed to enjoy having an audience watch him be cruel because it made him feel powerful and important. Marcus grabbed another rock and threw it at Luna, who was still lying on the ground trying to get up. The rock hit her back leg, and she cried out again. By now there were about 15 people standing around watching Marcus hurt the innocent dogs. Some people were calling the police on their phones, while others were trying to figure out how to help the animals without getting hurt themselves. Marcus was bigger and stronger than most of the people watching, and he looked angry enough to hurt humans too if they tried to stop him. One teenage boy tried to distract Marcus by yelling at him and calling him names, but Marcus just laughed and said he would hurt the boy too if he did not leave. The dogs were getting weaker and more scared with each kick and rock that Marcus threw at them. Their beautiful golden fur was now muddy, and some of it was red with blood. Nobody in the crowd knew that these dogs belonged to a famous movie star who was sitting just 50 feet away inside the coffee shop, completely unaware that his beloved pets were being tortured by a monster. Jason Statham finished his meeting with the movie director and stood up from his chair inside the warm coffee shop. He looked at his expensive watch and realized that his dogs had been outside for almost 20 minutes, which was much longer than he had planned. Jason always worried about his pets when they were not right next to him because he loved them so much and wanted to make sure they were always safe and happy. As Jason walked toward the front door of the coffee shop, he could hear loud barking and people shouting outside. This made him feel worried because his dogs Max, Charlie, and Luna were very well trained, and they never barked loudly unless something was seriously wrong. Jason pushed open the heavy glass door and stepped outside into the cold evening air. What Jason saw when he looked toward the park area made his blood turn cold with anger. There was a tall man in expensive clothes standing over his 3 dogs, and the man was clearly hurting them. Jason could see that Luna was lying on the ground and not moving very much. Charlie had blood on his head and was trying to hide behind Max, who was limping on one of his legs. Jason Statham was not just a regular person who happened to be famous. He was a real fighter who had trained in martial arts for many years before he ever started making movies. Jason knew how to hurt people who deserved to be hurt, and he also knew how to control his anger so he could think clearly even when he was very mad. Jason walked quickly toward Marcus, but he did not run or shout because he wanted to stay calm and make smart decisions. As he got closer, Jason could see that his dogs were badly injured and very scared. This made Jason angrier than he had ever been in his entire life, but he kept his face calm and his voice steady. When Jason was about 10 feet away from Marcus, he spoke in a low, deep voice that sounded very dangerous. He said, "Excuse me, but those are my dogs, and I need you to step away from them right now." Marcus looked up, and his face went white when he realized he was looking at Jason Statham, the famous action movie star. For just a moment, Marcus felt scared because he knew that Jason Statham was not just an actor, but also a real fighter who could probably hurt him badly. But then Marcus remembered that there were lots of people watching, and he thought Jason would not want to fight in front of cameras because it might hurt his career. Marcus made the biggest mistake of his life when he decided to act tough instead of apologizing and running away. Marcus stood up straight and said he did not care who Jason was, and that these were just stray dogs that nobody owned. Marcus even said that Jason could not prove the dogs belonged to him, and that he was going to keep doing whatever he wanted to them. Jason knelt down next to his injured dogs and gently touched each one to see how badly they were hurt. Luna was breathing, but she was not trying to get up, which meant she might have broken ribs. Charlie was bleeding from his head, but his eyes were alert, and he licked Jason's hand to show he was happy to see him. Max was standing, but he was not putting weight on his back leg, which probably meant it was injured. The crowd of people who had been watching Marcus hurt the dogs suddenly realized they were about to see Jason Statham, the famous action hero, deal with a real bad guy in real life. Everyone started taking out their phones to record what was about to happen because they knew this was going to be something amazing to watch. Marcus looked at all the people holding up their phones and recording everything that was happening, and he started to feel like he was the star of his own show. He thought that since Jason Statham was a famous person, Jason would not want to do anything that might make him look bad on camera. Marcus believed that famous people always had to act nice and polite in public, so they would not get in trouble with their fans or movie companies. This was another huge mistake that Marcus made because he did not understand what kind of person Jason Statham really was. Jason was not the type of celebrity who cared more about looking good than protecting the things he loved. Jason had grown up in a tough neighborhood in England, and he had learned to fight long before he ever became famous for making movies. Marcus stood up and pointed his finger at Jason, like he was the one in charge of the situation. Marcus said that being a movie star did not give Jason any special rights, and that he could do whatever he wanted to stray dogs that were bothering him. Marcus even threatened to call his lawyer if Jason did not leave him alone and go back inside the coffee shop. The crowd of people watching could not believe how stupid Marcus was being. Everyone knew that Jason Statham was not just an actor, but also a real fighter who did most of his own stunts in movies. Some people in the crowd started whispering to each other about how Marcus was about to learn a very painful lesson about picking fights with the wrong person. Jason stood up slowly from where he had been kneeling next to his injured dogs. Even though Jason was not the tallest man in the world, he had muscles that showed he spent many hours every day working out and training his body. Jason's shoulders were wide, and his arms were thick from years of lifting weights and practicing martial arts moves. When Jason looked at Marcus, his eyes were cold and angry, but his voice stayed calm and controlled. Jason said that Marcus had just made a very serious mistake by hurting innocent animals, and that there were going to be consequences for his actions. Jason also said that he did not care about cameras or lawyers or anything else except making sure Marcus never hurt another animal again. Marcus tried to act tough by puffing out his chest and taking a step toward Jason like he was ready to fight. But everyone watching could see that Marcus was actually scared because his hands were shaking and his voice sounded nervous when he talked. Marcus had spent years hurting creatures that could not fight back, but he had never faced someone who could actually hurt him. The people in the crowd started moving back to give Jason and Marcus more room because they could tell that something big was about to happen. Some people were calling the police on their phones, but others wanted to see Jason Statham use his fighting skills in real life before the cops arrived to break everything up. Jason did not make any big movements or dramatic gestures like actors do in movies. Instead, he just stood there looking at Marcus with the kind of stare that made it clear he was deciding exactly how much pain Marcus deserved for what he had done to the dogs. Jason's whole body looked relaxed but ready to move very fast if he needed to. Marcus realized that he had gotten himself into a situation that was much more serious than he had planned. But instead of being smart and trying to apologize or run away, Marcus decided to make his situation even worse by saying that Jason was just a fake tough guy who only looked strong in movies where everything was pretend. What happened next was so fast that most people in the crowd almost missed it even though they were watching carefully. Jason moved like lightning, and before Marcus could even think about defending himself, he was flat on his back on the wet ground with Jason's knee pressed against his chest. Marcus tried to get up, but Jason was much stronger and had him pinned down completely. Jason had used a move called a takedown that he had learned from years of training in mixed martial arts. The move looked simple, but it required perfect timing and technique to work properly. Jason grabbed Marcus by his expensive jacket and used Marcus's own weight against him to flip him over and slam him down onto the hard ground. Marcus hit the pavement so hard that all the air rushed out of his lungs, and he could not breathe for several seconds. When he finally caught his breath, Marcus tried to yell for help, but Jason put his hand over Marcus's mouth and told him to be quiet and listen carefully to what he was about to say. Jason's voice was calm, but everyone watching could hear the anger underneath his words. Jason told Marcus that he had just committed a serious crime by hurting innocent animals and that everything had been recorded on video by dozens of people. Jason said that Marcus was going to jail and that his life was about to become very difficult because the whole world was going to see what kind of person he really was. Marcus tried to struggle and get free, but Jason had trained with professional fighters and stunt coordinators for over 20 years. Holding down one cruel man who had never been in a real fight was easy for someone with Jason's skills and experience. Jason did not hurt Marcus more than necessary, but he made sure Marcus could not move or cause any more trouble. The crowd of people watching was amazed by how quickly and easily Jason had taken control of the situation. Many of them had seen Jason's movies, but watching him use his fighting skills in real life was much more impressive than anything they had seen on a movie screen. People were cheering and clapping because they were happy to see the man who hurt dogs finally getting what he deserved. Jason took out his phone and called the police to report that he had caught someone committing animal cruelty. He also called a veterinarian friend who lived nearby and asked him to come immediately to check on his injured dogs. Jason never took his eyes off Marcus while he was making the phone calls because he did not trust Marcus not to try something stupid if he got the chance. While they waited for the police to arrive, Jason noticed that many people were posting videos of what had happened on their social media accounts. Jason realized that by tomorrow morning millions of people around the world would know about Marcus and what he had done to innocent animals. This made Jason feel satisfied because he knew that Marcus would not be able to hide from the consequences of his cruel behavior. Marcus was starting to understand how much trouble he was in, but it was too late to do anything about it. The videos of him hurting the dogs and then getting beaten by Jason Statham were already spreading across the internet faster than Marcus could have imagined. His face and name would soon be known by people all over the world as the man who kicked dogs for fun until he picked on the wrong dogs. The police sirens could be heard getting closer, and Jason's veterinarian friend was also driving toward them as fast as he could. Marcus's evening of hurting innocent animals was about to turn into the beginning of the worst period of his entire life, and he had no one to blame but himself for making such terrible choices. The police arrived at the scene within 10 minutes and found Marcus still pinned to the ground by Jason Statham. The two officers who got out of the patrol car immediately recognized Jason from his movies, but they treated the situation very seriously because animal cruelty was a major crime in their city. Jason calmly explained what had happened while keeping Marcus held down until the officers could put handcuffs on him. Marcus tried to tell the police that he was the victim and that Jason had attacked him for no reason. But there were over 20 witnesses who had seen everything, and they all told the same story about how Marcus had been kicking and throwing rocks at the dogs. Even worse for Marcus was that at least 15 people had clear video recordings of him hurting the animals and then getting taken down by Jason. The police officers watched some of the videos on people's phones, and they could see exactly what Marcus had done to the innocent dogs. One of the officers said he had never seen such clear evidence of animal cruelty and that Marcus was going to face very serious charges. The officers put Marcus in the back of their police car while they finished taking statements from all the witnesses. While the police were doing their investigation, Jason's veterinarian friend Dr. Martinez arrived to examine the injured dogs. Dr. Martinez was a specialist who took care of animals that belonged to famous people, and he had known Jason's dogs since they were puppies. Dr. Martinez was very gentle as he checked each dog to see how badly they were hurt. Luna, the smallest dog, had bruised ribs from where Marcus had kicked her, but nothing was broken. Charlie had a cut on his head from the rock that Marcus threw, but it was not deep enough to need stitches. Max had a sore leg from being kicked, but he could still walk on it without too much pain. Dr. Martinez said all 3 dogs would be okay, but they needed rest and medicine for their pain. While Dr. Martinez was taking care of the dogs, something amazing was happening on the internet. The videos of Marcus hurting the dogs and Jason stopping him were being shared millions of times on every social media website. People all around the world were watching the videos and getting very angry at Marcus for being so cruel to helpless animals. By midnight that same night, Marcus's full name, address, and workplace had been discovered by people on the internet who were good at finding information about bad people. Someone found Marcus's social media accounts and shared screenshots of posts where Marcus had bragged about being mean to animals in the past. This made people even more angry because it showed that Marcus had been hurting animals for a long time. Marcus's boss at the insurance company saw the videos before he even got to work the next morning because other employees had sent them to him. Marcus's boss was so embarrassed and angry that he fired Marcus immediately and sent an email to all the other employees saying that the company did not support animal cruelty in any way. Marcus's landlord also saw the videos and decided that he did not want someone like Marcus living in his building. The landlord found a legal way to force Marcus to move out within 30 days because Marcus had brought shame and bad publicity to the apartment complex. Even Marcus's few friends and family members were embarrassed to be connected to him after the videos went viral. His mother called him crying and asking how she had raised a son who could be so cruel to innocent animals. Marcus's brother changed his last name on social media, so people would not know they were related. By the end of the first week after the incident, Marcus had lost his job, his home, and most of his relationships because of a few minutes of cruelty that had been recorded forever on video. 6 months after that terrible evening, Marcus Thompson's life looked completely different, and not in a good way. He was living in a small, dirty apartment in a city 3 states away from Millbrook because he could not find anyone who would rent to him in his hometown. Every time Marcus tried to get a new apartment, the landlords would search his name on the internet and find the videos of him hurting dogs. Then they would tell him they did not want him as a tenant. Finding a job was even harder than finding a place to live. Marcus had applied for over 100 jobs, but every employer did the same internet search and saw the same videos. Most companies did not even bother to call Marcus back after they found out who he was. The few employers who did interview him would ask about the videos, and Marcus could never give a good explanation for why he had hurt innocent animals. Marcus was working at a fast food restaurant making minimum wage, which was barely enough money to pay for his small apartment and cheap food. His coworkers at the restaurant found out about his past within a week, and they treated him like he was dangerous and disgusting. Nobody wanted to be friends with someone who hurt animals for fun, and Marcus ate his lunch alone every day. The legal consequences were also very serious and expensive. Marcus had to pay thousands of dollars in fines to the court, and he was sentenced to 200 hours of community service at animal shelters. Every week, Marcus had to spend 20 hours cleaning cages and feeding animals that reminded him of the dogs he had hurt. The people who worked at the shelters watched him carefully to make sure he did not hurt any of the animals there. Marcus also had to see a psychiatrist every month to talk about why he enjoyed hurting helpless creatures. The psychiatrist told Marcus that he had serious mental problems that made him want to hurt things that could not fight back. Marcus had to pay for these expensive sessions with money he could barely afford because his new job paid so little. Meanwhile, Jason Statham and his 3 dogs became even more famous than before. Jason used his celebrity status to raise money for animal rescue organizations, and he spoke at events about preventing animal cruelty. Max, Charlie, and Luna appeared with Jason at several of these events, and people loved seeing how healthy and happy they looked after recovering from their injuries. The videos of Jason protecting his dogs were shown on television news programs around the world, and Jason became a hero to millions of people who loved animals. Jason donated a large amount of money to build a new animal hospital in Millbrook, and the hospital was named after his 3 dogs. Marcus sometimes saw these news stories about Jason and his dogs on television, and they made him feel even worse about what he had done. Marcus realized that if he had just walked past those dogs that evening, his life would still be normal and comfortable. Instead, his few minutes of cruelty had destroyed everything good in his life. Marcus tried to delete all traces of himself from the internet, but the videos were saved on too many websites and devices. Every few months, someone would recognize Marcus from the videos and take new pictures of him to post online. This meant that Marcus could never escape from his past mistakes and start over with a clean reputation. The 3 dogs that Marcus had hurt were now living better lives than Marcus himself. They had expensive food, comfortable beds, and an owner who loved them more than anything. Marcus was alone, friendless, and struggling to survive because he had chosen to be cruel when he could have chosen to be kind. Marcus finally understood that every action has consequences, and that hurting innocent creatures would always come back to hurt the person who did it. But this lesson came too late to save his life from being ruined forever.